Hey guys, Tisha here, and we are back for something a little different. Now, I don't think you all know this, but I'm really into documentaries, and one of the ones that I've watched recently is A Father's Day, a Kirk Franklin story. And I said, you know what? Let me see how it's received if I talk about it. I recommend for everyone, if you have not seen it, to watch it because it really shows another side of Kirk Franklin that we don't normally see. And he was very transparent during some of these scenes. So we begin finding out that Kirk Franklin was originally born Kirk Smith, January 26, 1970, which means he is 53. Okay. Raised in a low income neighborhood in Fort Worth called Riverside. He went to church every Sunday with a woman who adopted him at the age of 4. And when he was 4 and she adopted him, that woman, her name was Gertrude, was 64. And she happened to be a distant relative. Now, this isn't something that's that significant. It's a significant age gap, but we've heard of family members adopting children before, but this was a distant relative. So as a result, he wasn't surrounded by family the way he would have been had he remained with his mother. Kirk said that he always knew that he was adopted, and that was the framework of who he was, which is a big statement because that means at his core, he always felt like he was adopted. So he said he wasn't raised with relatives. He didn't have any parties. He didn't really have a lot of friends. Like, he was alone. He spent a good amount of time alone. From time to time, like once to twice a year, he would see his biological mother, Deborah, and he described it as like having this constant scab that kept being reopened because he would see Deborah for a momentary time and then she would leave. So it was like she was constantly being rejected. He was constantly being rejected over and over and over again. And it just made things worse for him. He said that given that he was alone and he didn't have anyone, that he found his comfort in the piano as well as God. So originally when he began filming this, it was because he wanted us to see the behind the scenes footage of them recording his 13th album to be captured, because it's not something that he ever did before. But while doing this, something else happened. So Melody, who is one of his singers, who also happens to be a childhood friend, went to a funeral for Kirk Franklin's biological aunt. Kirk said he didn't go because he knew that Deborah was going to be there and he didn't want to see Deborah. And at this time, we find out that Deborah, his biological mom, he has not seen her face to face in 23 years, which is a long time not to see her. So he was 33 years old, basically. Well, no, 30 years old the last time that he saw his biological mom. So what happened was Melody explained to him that at this funeral, her father was approached by a friend whose name was Rick, who just happened to say in conversation that he dated Deborah when he was a little boy. So anybody else would feel like this sounds crazy, because who just says this? Like, who said, oh yeah, I dated them? And what's the significance of that, saying you dated someone when they were a little boy? Well, everything happens for a reason. And for some reason, this comment made by him got around and the rumor mill started. And they all look at him and they're looking at his features, his eyes, his hands, his nose, his mouth, things of that nature. And they're kind of comparing him to Kirk because they know that now that he at some point was with Deborah. So because of the rumors that started, somehow it gets back to Deborah. Deborah hears it and leaves a message on Kirk's phone saying, you know, I've heard the rumors. If you want to talk to me. There's no way this man is your father. I told you before that I wouldn't lie about anything. Rick, also around the same time, hears the same rumors. Because of the speculations, Rick decides he wants to clear it up. He goes and gets his own DNA test, has his stuff, does his swab or whatever, and then brings the test to Melody, who is, Kirk Franklin's friend, says, "This is my test sample. Please give it to Kirk. Tell him he can do whatever he wants with it if he'd like some answers." So Kirk says, he's had many men that over the years have claimed to be his father, but he's never had anyone go this far to go and get a test and do all these things. So as a result of him doing that, he decided, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get a test done too. So Kirk Franklin goes and he gets swabbed as well. We then have on May 22nd, 2023, he gets a call from his physician finding out that Mr. Rick, who gave the sample to his friend, is his biological father. At this time, Kirk Franklin is 53 years old and just finding out who his father is. As the results are being told to him, first you see him stand there in shock. Then you see him begin to pace back and forth, and he's so speechless that the physician is talking after reading the results, and his wife has to respond because Kirk Franklin is just busy pacing back and forth. You hear Kirk saying, "What? What? What?" in that shocked tone. I know it sounds crazy with me doing it, but that's how he sounds, like he is deliberately in shock. Then you hear him say, "This man is my father," in a high-pitched voice. He says it again, "This man is my father. My mama lied to me again. My mama lied to me again." Just pause for a minute. Your mom calls you, tells you about this rumor, and tries to shut it down immediately and tell you that there's no truth to it, that this man is not your father. You take the DNA test just to find out, thinking that obviously based on his reaction that it wasn't going to be, and it is. And now you know that your mother has lied to you again. And we find out his mom has lied to him again because he was introduced to another man that his mother said was his dad. That man passed from cancer. He spent a good portion of his life hating that man, thinking that that man was his father, and the man was not even his father. So you see him going through his mind about that as well. He said despite his many accolades, winning 19 Grammys, being the most successful gospel artist, all these other things that he's accomplished, that he's always managed to feel like the most insecure man in the room. That is deep. That is really deep. And those insecurities probably played out in many other ways, one of which is his relationship and his dynamic with his oldest son. We know that. 2 hours after finding out this life-changing news that his biological father is this man by the name of Rick, we see him back in the studio because he's supposed to be recording. He talks to his operations person about the situation and how he's going to have to, meet up with Mr. Rick. But we also see him say that he needs to talk to his mom. So he picks up the phone and he speaks to his mother's sister, Sandra. He says, "Hello, Sandra." And she says, "Who?" And you hear him say, "Auntie Sandra." And in that moment, he looked like a little boy again. She knows that it's Kirk on the phone because after he says Auntie Sandra, she goes, "Hello, Kirk." But in this moment, she chooses to chastise him because he didn't call her auntie. This is the type of stuff that happens. So this man is calling you, which she doesn't know it yet, but he's calling her for clarity. And she's over here trying to correct how he addresses her when she obviously has not been an active participant in his life. Yes, you are his biological mom's sister, but have you addressed how your sister treated your nephew? No. Instead, you're over here worrying about making sure that he calls you auntie. This is the stuff that just ugh. Anyways, he tells her, I need to see you and Deborah. He doesn't explain why, because he wants to make sure that he talks to Rick, his biological father, first. And he wants it to be done the way that he wants it to be done. And the way he did it was right, because he talked to Rick, and then as soon as he finished talking to Rick, he went to his aunt's house. Okay, so we find out that music is what gets him through moments like these, and that he didn't even realize how much he needed this album, because without this right now, he doesn't know how he'd begin to cope. And I cannot begin to imagine what that had to feel like. He's in the lyrics that they're singing in the studio, you hear him saying he'd give up every trophy that he had just to be somebody's son. And his voice is cracking while he's saying this. The amount of himself that he's put into his lyrics has just shown like how you never know, like you see these amazing artists, right? And sometimes people who may be in that industry as well may envy them, but you never know what someone went through to get them to this point. And I don't think anybody would want to feel the pain that Kirk Franklin has felt in order to accomplish what he has accomplished. Because hearing those lyrics, seeing him in this quick documentary, if you haven't watched it, go watch it, because I'm leaving a lot out. But I really feel like that it's an amazing testimony. That's what we'll say. So it's May 22nd that he found out that Rick is his biological father. It is now May 26th, and he is heading to his house to meet Mr. Rick for the first time to let him know the results of the DNA test. As he rings the doorbell, you can see his nervousness and his apprehension. He's sitting here saying while he's standing out there that Mr. Rick lives down the street from his recording studio, that Mr. Rick lives in the same city near where he works. He says that Mr. Rick's home is adjacent from the same home where his youngest son used to play when he was in high school. So this just goes to show you how many times he came into close proximity with this gentleman and never met him. Imagine how overwhelming that has to be. 53 years of wondering who your actual father is. You finally have the proof, and now it's all hitting you at one time. So Rick opens the door, seems very pleasant, tells them to enter. Rick does not know the outcome of the test yet, but as they sit on the couch opposite from one another, he says, there is no judgment, and I'm here in whatever capacity you need me to be. That, Kirk, you are the most important person in this equation. And as he's saying this, I'm sitting here saying to myself, this is what you call a man. Because Rick, too, is about to be blindsided. Rick, too, was cheated because he was unaware that it was a possibility that Kirk was his son. And had he not attended that funeral that day and had people say different things to him and him acknowledge that, yes, he did date Deborah, who's to say that they would have come to this conclusion? The universe, God, has an amazing way sometimes of allowing things to line up so you can get the information that you need. So Rick says this never came up before, that he was a kid when Deborah got pregnant and he can't remember. He said had he have been aware of the situation, that he would have pursued the truth. And you see Kirk give him the envelope. And I do believe he's telling the truth here, because as soon as things were said in the rumor mill, he pursued it by going and taking himself to get a DNA test. So there has to be some truth to it. So as soon as he reads it, Mr. Rick does, because he's reading it silently, you can tell that he is overcome with emotions. At this point, both men are on opposite ends of the couch and they are crying. Two lives, more than two actually, because it seems like Mr. Rick is married as well. All of these lives changed forever in this moment. He gets up, Mr. Rick does, because he's trying to compose himself because he's crying a lot. And Kirk is crying too. Kirk says, I want to hug you. Please forgive me if this is not the best hug. And you immediately see Rick, to me, look like a father and embrace his son. And the two men are embracing each other, crying. If you have not watched it, I'm saying it again, watch it. Because this man did not know that he had a son. And here he is finding out that he has a son. Not only does he have a son, but he has a son that he's probably seen over the years in the limelight, seeing him, perform, maybe listening to his music and all that other stuff, not knowing that this is his son. You hear Kirk say, love is a muscle that has to be trained. He feels indoctrinated in trauma and institutionalized in trauma. And I said, there are some people who really need to hear this, because I think a lot of times people make excuses for being who they are because of what they've been through. We've all been through things, myself included. But the things that I've been through isn't my excuse and should not be an excuse for why I'm taking out things on other people or why I'm operating from this terrible space. It's my job to make sure that I overcome it in whatever ways those are. Kirk then says, who am I well? Because I've only known myself broken. The first time I heard that, you all, I cried. When I say I cried because I felt that in every part of my being. Who am I well? Because I've only known myself broken. For him to be 53 years old and say that is deep. He said, you to his mom, not knowing how to love made me not know how to love. He sought a life seeking validation because of the absence that he felt from not having his mother in his life as well as his father. That's deep. We then see Kirk show up at his Aunt Sandra's house. He waits for his biological mom to arrive. Once she arrives, he walks in and you eventually see him sit down with the two of them. And he reveals that he found out who his biological father is, that it is Mr. Rick. He hands the paperwork. As she's reading it, she laughs and she says, his bio mom, Deborah, I can swear on my dead mother's grave that Richard Herbert is not your father. And while I'm hearing her saying this, I'm thinking she's so insensitive and so damaged, because for her to have a DNA test results right in her hand and still deny this is so infuriating. And I can only imagine how Kirk had to feel in that moment. She denies it so much that Kirk decides to get another DNA test to basically prove like, okay, there's nothing wrong with this DNA test. Even though you're saying it, there's nothing wrong. So they both take another one. And we find out again, he is the dad. We see him meet up with them to reveal the results in another setting. And all of them are in this room. His mother and father are across from each other. And she is avoiding certain eye contact from what I noticed. And we hear Mr. Richards said, I have enough love in my heart for you and whoever you decide to bring with you. And I want it to be done at your pace. They get up, they hug one another. In this moment, I feel like Kirk felt like he got all he needed from Mr. Richard, and that he is going to pursue things. He's definitely going to take his time, though, because he even mentioned how he's going to talk to his therapist. He's his longest client because he has to be able to work through this. So when he leaves, it's him and his bio mom and his aunt. And he talks about all his struggles that he had and all the things that he'd been through with being homeless and struggling to pay child support and all this other stuff. And she's still denying it. And she apologizes and says that test is just not true. He says, little boy Kirk needs to hear from you. Are you saying to me that you reject both of these DNA findings? And in that moment, I thought, you guys, okay, she's finally going to be like, okay, you're right. But she said yes. He tells her, I need this from you. I need you to be truthful about this. If you can't be truthful about this, there's no hug, there's no kiss, there's no embrace, there's nothing that can substitute the truth. Her sister, who finally, I think, realizes like, okay, yeah, my sister is full of crap. This is his father. This is the situation, and she's still denying it. And his sister looks at her and says, he just wants the truth, Deborah. And she still doesn't give it to him, which makes me want to know what happened to his biological mother that she is in such denial of this that she can't tell the truth. What trauma has happened to her? What has she blocked out that is allowing her to now further miss out on being in his life because she's still not telling the truth? She said she wants her son as she's sitting there crying, and she still can't have him. He said all he wants to do is to call Deborah and tell her that I lost so much not having her. And it would be so nice to have her and to have her say all the things that he needs to hear. But what he's realized over the years is that hurt people hurt people. And I agree. Because he was hurt and he hurt some people in his hurt. We later see him meet up with his eldest son, who he hasn't seen in 2 years. They show some clips because there was audio released of Kirk Franklin and his son going at it. And he says that, you know, he's had issues with him, but he needs to tell him this news. And he shows him the video of him finding out that, you know, this is his father, and his son immediately breaks down. And at first his son seemed apprehensive, but once his son breaks down, you see that wall come down with the breakdown. And Kirk is sitting there, and he apologizes to his son as well. The amount of brokenness that was in that room, the way that Kirk got on the floor and sat down with his son and embraced his son and apologized for every moment where his son felt what he felt from him as a dad, and how he needs him to forgive him. And his son says, I forgive you because you've forgiven me so many times for all the things that I've done. This man who's won all these awards, who's had all these accomplishments, spent so much of his life trying to be accepted and trying to find out who he is, that now that he knows a part of who he is, you can tell he just does not know where to go. I know this is a weird way to end it, but I just feel like it is our job as adults to make sure that we're doing the necessary work to better ourselves. There's some things that I've been through in my life that when I first had a child, I saw myself repeating cycles that were done to me, things that I didn't like I was doing. And I had to check myself, and I had to go to counseling and work on some things because I didn't need to be taking out my anger and my frustrations on my child who did not ask to be here. And I feel like if we would take the time to self-reflect more and to do the work, that situations like these could be somewhat alleviated. I'm not saying that there aren't going to be other kids that don't know who their fathers are and things of that nature, because my mom doesn't even know who all of her siblings are. So, this is something. Speaking of, I really think that I'm going to try to put my mom's DNA on that 24 DNA website or something like that, because I think that'd be an awesome gift. That's really off tangent. I just thought about it. But my point is, no, it's not going to take care of everything. But talking, holding our family accountable, seeing when there are people in broken spaces and trying to be there for them in whatever capacity that we can, even if that means that we have to, like in this case, for Kirk, pull away. Kirk does not need to be involved with his mother, with his biological mom. If she can't even be truthful with him about something that DNA has proven, she's not a safe space for him. You guys, let me know your thoughts down below. I know I was all over the place with my thoughts. That's what happens sometimes when I don't continue to take notes. I'm going to link this in the description so that you can watch the video for yourself. It's like 35-minute video, and it is, to me, somewhat life-changing. You all, let me know what you think. Until next time.